What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Tom Castro Shooting Academy page. I'm Tom Castro, and I want to get into a little bit about a practice that I just did for my members of the Insider Circle. I want to talk a little bit about some habits that I want to make sure that you guys aren't making mistakes on. And bad habits are something that are very easy to create in this sport. All right, bad habits are super easy to create in this sport. And how do you do that? It's because you come out here and you start focusing on speed and accuracy and all these different things. All right, so when you start getting these, I'll call them training scars, to where you start creating mistakes to where they become a habit. And I'll give you a great example. Where you really see it is on the draw, where what happens is instead of seeing the dot, you're thinking about the time and how fast you need to go to get the gun out of the holster and immediately put a shot on the paper. It's a big mistake, because what ends up happening is the more difficult the target becomes, now you're just going to pull the trigger because you're supposed to. You never want to get in the habit of just pulling the trigger because you're supposed to. This happens a lot in transitions as well. The faster you start to move on transitions, the more you're going to start making mistakes on your accuracy. All right, now, and what do I mean by that is until you have it locked in, until you're really focused and getting those alphas dialed in while you're trying to go fast, you have to make sure you get in the habit of being very focused on what you're working on. So I'll give you an example of one of the drills that I'm working on right now. This is a 3 pieces of paper, just simple 10 yards, 3 pieces of paper. One of them's probably about 5 yards away. The other one's 3 yards away from each other. So there's 3 yards and then 5. So it's a little bit farther on the last one. But here's what happens. I've been focusing on my draw on this drill and accuracy at the same time on my draw. My draw has really gone up in time because I switched over from a carry optics gun into a different holster, now shooting an open gun with a different grip, safety, all these different features. So I'm trying to clean up my draw and get my sub 1 second draw back. I've had my draw go up by close to 1/4 of a second easily, consistently, and that's my issue. I want to gain that 1/4 of a second back and still have my accuracy. I don't want to lose that. That's important. My accuracy on my draw has usually been pretty good. So I'm trying to pick that speed up and still be accurate. So as I started to run this drill, I caught myself running into bad habits because I was so focused on fast draw, fast draw, fast draw that I wasn't allowing myself to see the dot. I wasn't allowing myself to see the sights. You have to see those sights before you pull the trigger. Yes, I understand that speed and accuracy are not always easy to work together, but they do work together. So what allows me to pull the trigger isn't that my gun is on target. It's that my sights are aligned and my sights are on target. That's what gives me permission to pull the trigger. The faster you get the gun out onto target, the faster, or let me rephrase that, the longer I have to aim at the target and still get a sub-second draw. Okay? The faster I get the gun out onto target is the longer I have to aim and still get the same time. I'm no longer shooting pulling the trigger because I'm supposed to. I'm now pulling the trigger because the sights are lined up, my grip's where it's supposed to be, I've trigger prepped, and it's time to pull the trigger. All right, so let me run a couple of drills here, and I'll show you guys just a few things that I did that I made some mistakes on that I started to get into a bad habit. The first thing I did was wherever that red dot hit that brown paper on the left side was a trigger pull. It didn't matter. As soon as I saw red and brown, I pulled the trigger. One other thing that I did just on the draw was I was so focused on speed that when I got to the A zone or when I was staring at the target on the draw, I wasn't looking at a very small spot on the A zone. I was looking at brown the entire target. It didn't matter that I was supposed to be looking at a specific paster or the actual letter A on the target. I was looking at the entire A box, right? The entire A box. The next thing that I did where it caught me in transitions was I was worried about going fast. Now I'm trying to get a fast time on all 3 targets in the drill, that I'm focused on pulling the trigger when I get there. I never once took my face or my eyes off of the gun, the sight, and focused on the next target. That's not something I've ever done, but your head leads, not the gun. It's very important. The reason why is because if I just start staying behind my sights like I caught myself doing, what happens is you're not seeing the target once you get on there. You're just guessing that you're in the A because you're technically not seeing the A before you bring the gun to it. The last thing is I would take the last target because it was my last target. It's the most important target to me. And I would come off that second shot and I would just whip it as hard as I could into the third target. And again, the last target's the most important target, so why not respect it? You need just as good points on the last target as you do on the first and second target. You have to respect all three targets. It doesn't matter. So I was getting into the 170s on an average, but I was getting bad hits. And what I mean by bad hits is I was getting Alpha Charlies. So it wasn't perfect runs, but that's what I'm doing here. I'm not here for perfection. I'm here to fix things, clean things, and make things better so that later on I'm getting closer to that perfection that I'm striving for at all times. All right, so I'm gonna run this a couple times and then we'll talk a little bit about the whole, like basically how I'm working this section and how I'm working this drill, okay? Here we go. All right, so that was a pretty good run, but I'm gonna talk about a couple of things here. I had a Alpha Delta, Alpha Charlie, and then an Alpha Charlie. So I'm gonna go through these targets real quick and I'm gonna show you exactly what happened. And this is some of the things that I was talking about earlier. I stayed behind my sights. So it went Alpha on the draw, swept into a Delta, Alpha on the transition, swept into a Charlie, Charlie on the transition, finished in the A zone. So there is a big thing that I just talked about in not keeping your eye or your head behind your sights. You have to look at the next target, okay? My total time was 172 with a .84. Tensing up, gotta relax. Here we go. Ah! .83 draw, 172. I'm gonna slow down my draw just a little bit and get under more control. So I had two Charlie because I aimed there, and two Alpha. Much, much, much better, much more controlled, other than the hits. Two Charlie, two Alpha, and two Charlie. My total time was 179. One of the reasons I do drills like this and why I'm not okay making mistakes. The reason I like this is because now I've put my mindset at a super fast speed level. So if I slow down just a little bit, I'm still faster than if I was always going slow. Even though I just spent 2 magazines making mistakes, I'm learning from those mistakes. I'm learning my limitations and where and when I cannot and have to go. I need to know that. I have to know when I can attack and when I need to take a little bit more time on specific things that I'm not good at. And those are called weaknesses, right? We have to know your weaknesses and your strengths. You can't have all strengths. You're gonna have some weaknesses. So when you have those little weaknesses, you have to learn from those and you have to start attacking those weaknesses during your training.